Welcome back to Englebrook Independent News. I'm your host, Ryan, and tonight we're going to talk about Iran again. A few weeks ago, there were protests that rocked the entire country. IRGC, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, they're the essentially secret police slash state militia. They're probably actually more powerful, or I should say, politically, they're definitely more powerful than the army. They're probably also better trained and better funded and better equipped. Well, a lot of the protesters were attacking these security forces, the IRGC, and attacking some of their bases within Iran as obviously a show of extreme hatred towards the policies of the government. There was a brutal crackdown. Anywhere between 5 and 20,000 people were killed. Some estimates go as high as 30,000, though that is difficult to determine. There were a couple hundred security personnel who were also killed in these clashes. So what we're seeing from that is that the protesters this time were not simply asking for a change in policies. They want a new government. They want regime change. They want a revolution. This has really freaked out the Iranian establishment, particularly the Ayatollah, who is periodically in hiding every so often because of threats to him. Uh so the United States during the protests, or I should say the president, Donald Trump, said to the Iranian people that help is on the way. He did not elaborate on what this means, though he did say that it's possible that there would be American airstrikes in Iran against the IRGC in order to facilitate the protests or protect protesters from the militia there. That was a few weeks ago. Since then, we have seen Israel start rearming, particularly its missile defenses, and we have seen carrier strike groups move into position. There's one in the Gulf, the Persian Gulf, there's one in the Mediterranean, and there's another naval strike group that is supporting the carrier strike group also in the Persian Gulf. There's a lot of firepower built up there. And as we have seen previously, or more recently, I should say, in Venezuela, when the US sends a fleet of ships to dock outside of a country that it has some issues with, there's going to be some kind of military action. What makes it even more likely is that not only have European nations advised their citizens to leave Iran, the United States has done so, and so has China. And I think that's the most telling one, because China is not a partner with any Western nation or the United States in that region. So for the Chinese to be telling their citizens, leave this country now, something bad is going to happen, that indicates that they have some intel on what the United States is going to do. And it has prompted that response. So it looks like very soon there will be strikes. On what, on where, why, for how long? No one knows. The Iranians, obviously, they have their nuclear sites that were bombed earlier by the United States and Israel, but these don't seem to be operable right now. Now, there are many IRGC sites throughout the country, most of which, if not all of them, are known to United States intelligence. So it's not as if there aren't targets to strike. What we now come up against is, are they good targets to strike? Will it do anything? If we, let's say we take out 75% of all their command structures, does that weaken the IRGC enough that they could be toppled by protesters? And then on top of that, will the protesters return to the streets? Will they seek revolution? We don't know. So we're kind of in this weird holding pattern where the United States is negotiating with the Iranians, who are negotiating with the United States. They're playing silly diplomatic games, changing the venue, deciding that they are not going to talk about certain diplomatic issues, such as intercontinental ballistic missiles, which it was pointed out is more of an issue for Israel than it is for anybody else. But anyway, the negotiations don't seem to be going anywhere. There's no real productive talk, and the American administration keeps on hinting about possible strikes or military action of some kind. Uh, I think this is going to really come down to Reza Pahlavi. Now, he's the exiled crown prince of Iran. His father was the Shah, the king of Iran, or Iran, who was ousted in the 1979 revolution that brought the Ayatollahs into power in the first place. Something stands out about him more than anybody else. He, or I should say, protesters are chanting for him, or were chanting for him in the streets of Iran. And they were putting up graffiti everywhere saying, long live the king, or bring back the king, or all hail the king, whatever slogans exactly it was. I'm not certain. I don't know Farsi, so I can't translate exactly, but there were slogans to this effect. Down with the regime, bring back the Shah. So Reza, he did something interesting. He tested how much influence he has in Iran by telling the protesters on one day, on Thursday and Friday, I want you to come back out into the streets in as big a protest as you can, get everybody you can at 8 p.m. And it happened 2 days in a row. And this is when the crackdown really started because the Iranian regime now found that Reza Pahlavi has some influence over their citizens, particularly those that want change and want a new government. I think it's going to require his partnership with the United States to bring about any change, whether that is the removal of the Ayatollah or a substantial change in policies. I personally, I without his leadership and as acting as a figurehead to rally around, I think that the crackdown would be successful. I think that they have successfully put down the momentum that was being gained by the protesters, uh, which is not to say that they won't start again, or that the protesters have forgotten why they went out in the first place, or that they've forgiven the regime. If anything, the regime is hated now more than ever, where many Iranians are saying that everybody in the country knows someone who died during the protests, being killed by the security forces for wanting nothing more than a better life. So the Iranian people are obviously still seething and bubbling with rage, though they have been subdued somewhat for now. If Reza Pahlavi can come back and galvanize them and get people to rally around him, I think they have a real chance at revolution, especially if they're supported by United States military strikes, which is essentially what they need because the citizens don't have their own way to fight against the regime. They don't have arms, or I should say, the weapons that they have are not sufficient to overcome their adversaries. So, what would a U.S. strike look like? Again, we don't know. And if Reza Pahlavi is not working with the Americans or coordinating with them, I don't know that they're going to be able to bring back the protests, even if there are military strikes by the United States, whether that's just airstrikes or any kind of special forces. It appears that special forces have already been involved in Iran, and we don't know if these are foreign special forces or if these are saboteurs who are Iranian born. But there are explosions every day in Iran where buildings are blown up and are on fire, and the Iranian government is saying that these are all gas leaks. There's been over a dozen in different cities, some of them simultaneously happening. So it's very clear that there is at least an underground operation of saboteurs, if not a foreign military presence of special forces. So it seems unlikely to me that there won't be a military strike, especially considering that we have all that firepower there. and that there have been these explosions, as I was just mentioned. It just comes down to when and where and to what end. Um, Now, a lot of people have been very critical of the United States' support of the protests and putting military hardware within striking distance of Iran as doing the bidding of Israel. It's true, Israel does have reason to want the regime changed. And that's because the Ayatollahs and their main supporters are from a strange sect of Islam called the Twelvers. And one of the things that they believe is that they cannot bring about a worldwide Muslim utopia if Israel still exists. They have some kind of prophecy that they believe that they need to kill the Jews in order to usher in the Muslim utopia that we all are supposed to be living under. So these are not people that are going to negotiate with Israel. They have a stated objective of killing all the Jews because they believe that that is necessary for their own religious salvation. There's no arguing with these people. Um, so I can understand why Israel would be very much for this and wanting the United States to play as big a role as possible, considering that we have more resources and a bigger military. But to the naysayers who say, this is just doing Israel's bidding, I'm kind of looking at it from the other direction. Like, well, no, we cannot let 12er ideology be a driving force within this region. Um, I mean, we saw how the Iranians have been supporting Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, and numerous other militias, whether it's in Syria or in Iraq. So these are people who are not just a problem for Israel, they're a problem for everybody. And it's not the Iranian people. Let's make that clear. It's the regime, it's the Ayatollahs and the Twelvers. And it seems from what I've been seeing from all these protests is that most Iranians don't want them in power anymore. They don't agree with their policies, and they're perfectly fine living in Iran while the Jews live in Israel. That apparently is not a major concern for your average Iranian. So I am personally in support of regime change for the reasons just listed, that the Iranian regime is um, often and frequently involved in funding wars and militia groups and terror groups in the region, and that they're inflexible. If it's one thing if they want to have these beliefs to themselves, but it's another thing to try and drag the entire world into it with you. So I don't know how this is going to turn out. I hope that Reza Pahlavi is able to galvanize enough support, form a real interim government that is democratic and really represents the Iranians, and that we can get this all wrapped up pretty quickly. Thanks for joining us again, and as always, like, comment, and subscribe.